Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this advanced Podio webinar talking about workflows. And we have our presenters, Mac, and I guess, special guest, Kelly. I'll go ahead and pass it off to Mac here.
Thanks, Allison. Hi, everybody. Once again, my name is Mac Flintosh. I've been over here with Podio for just shy of 8 years now, and am joined by the wonderful Kelly Markoff, who's the queen of support. So we're really excited to be able to get some new sort of features in front of you guys that we haven't done in a webinar previously. So first and foremost, we just want to give a big thank you for attending. We love to see the interaction that's coming through. We've had great responses to this webinar series to the point where we plan on continuing this through to the new year. So, please make sure that you're getting those recordings and those emails, you're saving those. Feel free to share those with anybody else who might be curious and just be able to use the resources here. What we're going to really dive into today is going to be that Podio workflow automation, previously known as Globoflow. So we get a lot of questions about how these automations work, what's possible, how those can be set up, or even how to create the account. So we're going to go through all of those steps today with the assistance of Kelly here. So the first thing we want to touch on, just the obvious question, what is Podio workflow automation? So all of the workflows within Podio are what we call condition and trigger based. So when we say condition, it's very, very logic heavy. A lot of if-then statements or rules you can put in place that define what must be true or untrue in order for an action to occur. So, if I've selected 1, 2, 3, I want action A to occur. If I've selected 4, 5, 6, I want action B to occur. So when we're looking at this list, our wonderful project lead, Pallavi, has put this together for us, but we have a nice little list of your different trigger options, your filters, which are also different conditions, and those different actions. So the trigger is going to be whatever is actually kicking off the action itself. So for instance, when the item is created, when it's updated by a date field. So that tends to be really, really helpful, especially when we're keeping track of deadlines. Just lots of different options here. Your filters can be pretty, simplistic or advanced depending how far you want to go into it. If I've changed a field and it was previously one field and now it's exactly another, that has to be in place in order for something to occur. If we're looking at more of that CRM side of things, I can say if it's an individual client versus a business client, those might have different next steps. So that's a great example of a filter. If we're looking at it on the project side, I can say if it's a specific project type, that might have different next steps than a different project type. So just a nice way to think of how these filters can function. And then underneath that, we have the option for your different actions. So you can see there's quite a bit here. I don't know if anyone was able to see that web form that we had sent over both yesterday and this morning. We kind of gave an option of things you might be interested in. We'll make sure that we're emailing you those resources later today or early tomorrow, so you can have those quick links to those articles. But you can see there's a ton you can do, everything from creating a templated PDF to generating out an assigned task, sending messages, updating items, getting previous revisions, creating items in different apps, getting referenced items on things that might be linked in that relationship field, and then even the more advanced integrations that we have with ShareFile and Write Signature for ShareFile. So being able to create a ShareFile folder, add a client to that folder, or send any of these documents that are being generated as a PDF, or write sig templates for signature. One of the really cool workflows with that signature tool is once it's actually signed within Write Signature, that can act as the trigger for your next action within Podio. So think of a signed PO or a contract or proposal automatically being kicked off with that sort of client management or that project that's being coming through there. Great. So with that, we can go ahead and hop in. So right now I am in a recently upgraded to Podio Premium account. So you can see I'm basically in that just accounting practice space that I got from that app market. I can see sort of my samples here. I'll pop into good old Winston Bishop. If anybody knows the new girl, you can see we had some nice throwbacks at Winston at Cats. But again, completely customizable templates. You guys know this if you've been within Podio before. I can see what sort of services they're into, what sort of statuses I might be looking at. But here I have all that sort of data I want. So now let's say I wanted to create a workflow or get into that Podio workflow automation where I'm saying if it's going from a new client to a current client, maybe that's sort of a recurring process, or if it's tax services, needs different next steps than financial planning, I want to be able to kind of create some of those automations here. So in order to create that Podio workflow automation account, once you're already upgraded to Podio Premium, you can find that first app that you want to create that workflow on, hit that little wrench, and we're going to go down to that workflow automation tab. Great. And let me quick log out of this one. I want to make sure I'm logging into the correct one. So here you can see, I can see create my account. So because I've never logged into Podio Workflow Automation on that Podio Webinar 2 email, I'm going to go ahead and create that new account so I can do that. I'll hit that create account button. What you're seeing here is it's just reading that Podio instance so it can pull all of my workspaces and my apps. And then you always get this sort of nice little walkthrough guide. So it's letting me know I can choose my app based off of that tree. Again, I'm going to do a quick little refresh from Podio, make sure I get that space in here. And now let's say I wanted to go ahead and make sure I can get that sort of full view. So what I'm going to do, actually, is a quick hop in here. I want to create a sort of a demo workspace so I can make that reference. Go ahead and create. I'm going to keep that private for right now. I'm going to go ahead and add an app pack here. So let's say I want to go ahead and get that project management app pack just as an example. That's going to bring those preset boilerplate templates directly into that workspace. Give that just a second here. As you can see, it's pulling 3 different templates in, so we want to make sure it just gives that time. I can see that that's pulled through. And now I have that space that I'm able to work in. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into that workflow automation. Again, I'm going to refresh from Podio. So anytime you're making a change within Podio, you want to make sure you refresh so that it shows in this workflow automation side. You can see that new workspace is now highlighting here. It's checking to see if there's anything that needs to be imported. All right, great. And so now we have this, the information in here. Once you're in your Podio Workflow Automation account, whenever you see that little house, that's referring to your organization. So if you're a member of multiple organizations, you should see different houses there. When I go ahead and click into that, that's going to show me my different workspaces. And from there, I can see the apps within those workspaces. One thing that we also want to make sure everyone knows is how you can kind of manage within those account settings. So I'm going to go into account and go to account details. Great. And here's where we can kind of see a little bit more of the back end. So Kelly, I want to kind of pass to you if you want to go into a little bit more detail about what some of this information needs and how we can sort of attach anything from an additional user or integrating some of our other tools.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the first upper left-hand corner, this confuses a lot of people. The name and email address, that's going to be the account owner. It's not always going to be you. So if you see, your manager's email, something like that, totally fine, totally normal. Left-hand side, if we scroll down a bit, you have your account usage. It's just going to have your number of flows. You're always going to be on Podio Premium for your subscription. Additional users, this is a huge one. So if you have a team and you want other people to have access to create flows, edit flows, do whatever you want here, you click that add new user and you just add their email address, hit save, and it's done. They do need to be an admin in the workspace on the Podio side to have access to this. So if they're not an admin, they're going to try and log in here, see nothing. It's not going to work. So just make sure that they're an admin, then they'll have full access. This is great, if you work with partners, anybody else, even externally, you can add them here. Down below that.
Kelly, also to echo that, a lot of times we'll see where maybe the account owner for billing purposes is different than the person who's going to be setting up the account. So we just want to make sure that the account owner is actually adding this individual in to make sure that there's no lag in time to be able to get those flows set up.
Absolutely. Yeah. The next one is the SMTP server. If you have a custom one you want to add, by all means, you just hit change, enter the details it asks you for, the server, the port, etc. And then that's how you can use your custom ones, or you can just send out through us directly. We do that for you. The integrations are a huge one. This is the rest of our products. So share file account, write signature account, and then something called click send SMS. That's to send out text messages. If you do have a share file account that you're going to add here, you need to add it on Podio first. You'll have an option to add it. Profile icon, and then account settings, and then services. And then you pick the share file one. Make sure that's connected on Podio. And then you go back to workflow automation, go ahead and add it there, and you'll be all set.
Yep. Similarly with write signature, because that would be kind of viewed as separate, we're just going to make sure that you have your sort of subdomain name that you're using for your ShareFile account. You'll plug that in first, then your email address. It's all tied by those email addresses and those subdomains. It's an easy way to pull that through. All right, hey Kelly, do you want to maybe touch a little bit on sort of your journey and how you're able to see what's going on in this aspect? Because this is a nice way to be able to get a good view on those different flows.
Yeah, sure. So over here, once you have a bunch of flows built or as you're building, this will actually show you how much time you've saved based off of what kind of flows you've built. So if you've got 3 flows and a couple of things are adding tasks, that may save you an hour a week. If you've got, 50 flows and you're doing a bunch of actions, you're probably saving you and your team a ton of time. And that's going to show you how much time you're actually saving in real time.
Yep. And a nice way to look at this, guys, is almost like that return on investment. So you want to know how much this is really helping your day-to-day or your business. You can actually see that in a tangible time. So we have we have actually a few customer stories, but one in particular that we're going to highlight in the email that's going out over to you. Kelly, do you remember about how much time they were saving with Podio Premium?
It was over 4,000 hours in just the past 30 days.
So if you're thinking, especially if you're doing anything with a billable hour, think about how much that can really equate to. It's pretty insane. All right, cool. Great. So with that, we're going to hop back to that My Flows. I'm going to hop back to my My Flows section. Again, I can see my workspaces, all of my apps, and I know we were referencing, we wanted to go ahead and do a workflow within that client's app. So I'm going to click in here, and now it's letting me know, hey, we can create a different workflow. So I'm going to go into Add New. You do have a few options here. Kelly, I don't know if you want to speak to like a new chart, CMS, or feed. I know for the most part, 90% of the time, people are just sticking with that new flow option, but do you want to touch a little bit on what these might be?
Yeah, so the new flow, I would say probably closer to 95% is what you're going to pick.
That's fair.
New chart, if you want to do some type of visual chart, we do have a couple of different options for that. You're going to click new chart. CMS is exactly what it says, embedding data to an external web page. And then you have a news feed. I haven't seen it too often, but you can use that as well. But most of the time, you're going to click new flow.
Yeah, new flow tends to be home for most people. So we'll go ahead and go into that new flow. And the first thing it's going to ask is what trigger you want. So that's that first sort of tile we had on that slide, kind of figuring out what you want to generate out the next flow. So kind of walking through what your options are here. We have that item created. So this is whenever you're saving a new client or a new project within Podio. As soon as you hit save, that would mean a workflow would generate. We see this used really successfully with things like web forms. So if you've turned any of your apps in Podio into a web form, so let's say it's a request for a project or a request for contact, once they filled that out and submitted it, maybe you want a date to automatically fill or a task to automatically generate to make sure that that's not falling through the cracks or to automatically assign to somebody, you can use that item created trigger. Kelly, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like item updated is probably the most popular when we're going through the flow. Yep, but this would be really good. Yeah, absolutely. But this is great if you're changing anything within your app. So if a status is changing, if a date is changing, if you've changed who it's assigned to, anything along those lines, that would say that this change is what's actually generating out that step. You have, again, a ton of more options, things like new comment, date field. So this is great for date triggers. I'd mentioned kind of previously on that slide that this is anything deadline based. This can be huge. So let's say you have a project and it's in stage 2 of 5, but its deadline is 3 days from now. You can say, if my project deadline is less than 10 days away and my status is not at least at this stage, maybe I want a priority level to go up. If a lead has come in and the status of that lead has not changed 24 hours since it was submitted, I want an alert to go out. So it's a really nice way to make sure nothing's slipping through the cracks, especially as you're getting more busy. So Kelly, I'm gonna give you the wonderful job of being able to touch a bit on the manual flows and kind of walk through what that might actually look like.
Sure. So a manual flow, these ones are different. You've actually built them backwards. So this is a flow that will be triggered by another flow. And then you're going to build that second flow first, what you want your end result. And then you're going to build the first flow, the flow that will trigger this one. And then you'll have an action that maybe we can show you later. You'll have where you can pick and choose which other flow you want to trigger. That will be the flow that you just created.
Yep. Great. Task completion, pretty straightforward. When you're saying a specific task is marked complete, maybe you want a status to change or the next task in that list to generate. So we get that request a lot. Like, I don't want task 3 to generate before task 2 is complete. So I can say, once that task is completed, I want the next one to generate out. I'm going to hop to this particular one and let Kelly have the wonderful joy of the email reply, SMS reply, and external link. But that right signature document signed, that's kind of what I was referencing when we were going through that slide again. You can actually say the signature from a document in right signature, as long as it's been generated through a workflow from Podio, can generate out the next step. So again, as a purchase order or change order is sent out, once that's signed, that can update the status in Podio. If a proposal or a quote is signed, that can move that to a new client and start whatever project you would need to. So it's a really powerful way to be able to bring your whole business together with one sort of smooth flowing automation here. Kelly, do you want to touch a little bit on that email reply, SMS reply, and external link?
Sure, yeah. So with workflow automation, you have an action to send out an email. Basically, this email reply action is when you get a reply on that email, this can trigger that. So if somebody replies to a marketing email, you probably want that to do something later. So you can build a flow based off of that trigger. Next one, SMS text reply, exact same thing. So you can send out text messages with our partner ClickSend. If somebody replies to that text message, which is huge for the real estate world, you can have a flow trigger based off of that reply. And then external link, exactly what it sounds like. You have an external link on a website. Maybe you have a custom built web form using another service outside of Podio. If a link is clicked there, you could build something based off of the data they entered.
Yep. And a good example, kind of echoing, I know it is really big in real estate. That was a good point, Kelly, but like an SMS text reply, I like to think of this almost as like a doctor appointment confirmation. So if you're sending that SMS through Podio, if you know, hey, Allison, you have an appointment at 2 p.m. on Thursday. Please hit Y to confirm or N to reschedule. Based off of those replies, you can have different sort of next steps generate.
Good point. Yeah, that's exactly how it works.
Cool. So with this, let's go ahead and say when the item is updated for this particular little mini flow we'll build. So here you can see it's bringing me in. I have my trigger. I know what app it's in. One little sort of inside tip, do yourself a favor and name your flows as specifically as you can. If you needed to go in and edit something, it's so much easier to see sort of the write-up of that flow directly in that title page, as opposed to having to click into everyone and read the description. So once we figure out what we want to accomplish here, we're going to go ahead and do that. Again, here I have my filters. Those are conditions. So when I say if field, select field, this is going to show me every field within the template that I'm building my workflow off of. So these are all of my fields that could generate a workflow within my client's app. So let's say, again, I want to say my service it's interested in. Cool. So right now it's just saying it's changed. That means it can change to anything. It's not necessarily giving me a whole lot of priority. So I want to go ahead and add a few more conditions. So when you want to add multiple either actions or conditions, it's going to be that plus button right here. So with this, I can say, if my previous value, which is saying if this was this before of that interested in was equal to not set. So that's saying it was completely empty. And I hit that plus again, I can say my field value match. So that's going to, again, say that client services interested in, there we go, is equal to, you can also do not equal to, contains, does not contain. But with this, I'll say tax return services. So this is saying this was not set previously and I'm moving it to tax return services. So I want something to generate out. Other thing worth pointing out, you can also make these and or. So it doesn't necessarily always need to be and. You also have the ability for custom calcs within your filters as well. So with that, if we needed to get anything with PHP, we wanted to get a little bit more in-depth on things that can be generated. So you can see I have some very light coding here, but if you needed to get more technical, you can go ahead and pull in that. There's a ton of sort of helpful tips that we can provide. So little shortcuts of what can mean what. That's going to come up right when you hit that info button. One thing I've learned with playing around with PHP is Google is your friend. So if you did want to get a little bit more complicated, it's something that you can normally figure out pretty quickly. This tends to be used quite a bit when we're talking about like partners or developers. So if you're bringing in that third-party consultant that's really well versed in this, they can take this, to the next degree with being able to get some of those different actions in there. All right, cool. Now for actions, this is what we want to have happen. So, I've set my trigger, I've set my conditions. Now what? So I can go ahead and hit that plus button. And again, I can see my full list of actions. There's quite a bit that you can do here. Again, sort of insider tip, once you get familiar with the platform, if you don't feel like scrolling, you can go ahead and just type. It's going to show you anything that's matching those. With this, you can do things like send messaging, again, assign tasks, make that PDF, attach files. So tons of different options here. One thing I did want to kind of speak with Kelly in particular is going to be continue to scroll down, these sanity checks. So the sort of if of making sure something is true or not true. Kelly, would you mind going into a little bit more detail on that? Because I know we do get a lot of questions around those.
Yeah. So a sanity check, the way that I kind of look at it is it's basically a filter, but a super customizable filter. So you're going to be using anything that's in that yellow box. You'll use the same thing for a custom variable. That's all customized in PHP. You can pull in your tokens just like Mac did. So if you can get pretty basic, if this status equals to exactly what you have in Podio, in this case not set, then or null or 0, you can use this instead of using a filter. That's easier for you. Some people can, especially if you hire a partner, something a simple filter or a sanity check, they can get really intense and specific. So if at one point it was equal to this or this, or if the other status, was equal to these 3 things, then I want you to do something else. And then you do an end diff to kind of close off that action. So you're going to do your sanity check, do whatever action you wanted. Then you're going to do an end diff, and then you can continue with more sanity checks. So that really allows you to have one flow with, 5 different filters using sanity checks versus having to build a single flow for all of those 5 different conditions you want met.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Cool. So for this sort of very mini flow before we bring it into a space that has a little bit more built into it, just kind of showing if we wanted to assign a task. So keeping it very small. For that, selecting the user, I can have it be, a member of that workspace. I can say whoever's created or revised it, or where you see in parentheses where it says client assigned CPA, that's going to be the variable person who's been assigned to that particular item. So that can be, if it's person A for one lead, person B for another, it would assign to whoever's attached there. With this, I can say, reach out to client and confirm. I promise I know how to spell. For due dates, I can have, my current date plus or minus any amount of days, similar with time, and then I can provide full details here. Again, these little items on the right-hand side are where you're pulling those tokens from Podio. So if I wanted full details, and let's say I wanted to pull, the company individual's name and their email just directly in the details of that task, that's going to be that variable item from that particular item. So with this, I can say type of service changed task. And with this, I can say null to tax. All right, great. With that, I can go ahead and save. And we've created our flow. So with this, I'm able to see my flow. I can edit it if I need to. One of the nice things is I can copy it if I need to. So if there's a situation where you just need to change, the name of the task, depending on the stage, I can go ahead and copy that, make those small changes and be able to go through. I can manually run that, or I can even export that. So if I have a colleague that wants a similar flow, I can export that out, be able to send that over to them since it's already completed. With every single workflow you have this nice little recipe. So it tells you exactly what's happening with that nice little flow chart. We're going to touch on logs in our other space where it's going to be a little bit more in-depth. I can see any notes, and I can see the save time estimate for every single time this is generated. So some of the flows, which you'll see in just a moment, can be quite advanced. They can save a ton of time, but again, that sort of return on investment, being able to see that in real time is really nice and helpful. All right, cool. So with that, I'm going to quick sign out of this space. I'm going to sign out of this Podio. Let me hop into my other Podio. And the reason I'm doing this, just in case there's any confusion, is we wanted to be able to show how to create that new account, but we also wanted you to show when something had a little bit more data in it. So that's why I'm coming in here. All right, great. So I can go into my webinar flows space. And again, I'm just going to click the app that I want to create something on, hit my little wrench, and go down to workflow automation. Cool. So this I'm going to log in. Because I was just added, remember when we added Podio Webinar 3, the additional user, you may see multiple accounts here. Poor Kelly, I think you have like 50 that pop up because you've been added to so many at this point.
Probably, yeah.
Probably. So with this, I want to just make sure I'm clicking into the account I want to view. And here we are. Again, I have my Podio space. You can see those different aspects here. And so we wanted to touch on some of the flows that we had created that we'd seen as requests quite often. So I'm going to go into my projects app in this particular instance. This is a good example of when I'm copying something. So in this, I'm saying when my status is changed from planning to stage 1, I want to email the client and add tasks. So that's a request we get a lot of, making sure that the client feels in the loop without them learning a new software system, kind of cutting back the calls coming in of getting updates or the manual time. So what we've said here is just whenever I've gone from one stage to the next, I want that client to be informed. So when I come in here, again, I can see that full breakdown. I can see any notes. I can see those previous logs, which Kelly will go into momentarily, and I can see the amount of time that saves. Kind of looking at this flow from the inside. Great, so again, you can see my triggers when an item is updated. My conditions are saying that it had to be in pending and go to stage 1. And then Kelly, I'd love for you to be able to talk about this get reference, because this is something that we see quite often. Before you hop into that, I just want to show you guys what that's referencing, because I'm in that projects app right now. As you all know, Podio is a very strong relationship database as well, being able to link things across different workspaces. So if I'm in my projects app, when I'm building those flows, here with that related client, I can see that sort of relationship field to that client itself. However, that lives in a different app. So when we come here, Kelly, you want to go in a little bit more detail of what we're referencing with those get referenced items?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have that drop down for direction, the second little line on the get referenced. I would say more times than not, 75% or so, it's going to be a forward direction. It can get very confusing, forward, reverse, both. I don't know what to do. So a forward relationship means the relationship field is on the trigger item. The reverse is the relationship field is on the destination item. A great way to kind of poke around, because I think everyone who uses Podio and workflow automation really needs to get in and poke around, is if you click the wrong one, it's not going to give you an option for the using field, which is the next line down. There's nothing going to be there. So if you ever click any field or there's nothing down in there, you probably clicked the wrong one. Usually, I would say go with forward unless you're a more advanced user. Try forward, see if that works. If not, you can try reverse. I usually don't suggest using both directions. That usually gets very confusing. You'll have a ton more options for what you want to pick later on. And just usually not the great idea. Again, if you're an advanced user, you know how to use it very well, you do you.
I love that phrasing. Great, so for using any fields, you want to touch a little bit on what that's referencing to?
Yeah, so that is going back to your Podio field. So this one, forward, we're in the clients, from the projects, from that project, that's in parentheses, so that app, the related client.
Yep.
Field.
And any field would just be like, once the trigger is going through, that's what it's pulling from.
Yeah, and you can leave it blank, absolutely. You don't have to pick anything.
I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're selecting the field that it's referencing is if you want to get really finite with what has to be.
Absolutely.
Yep,
that acts as an additional filter, yes.
Okay, cool. And now one of the things that I get questioned a lot when I'm doing demos and have this back end up is, what does continue mean? Like, what does it mean following? What does that actually translate to in layman's terms?
So you could have, the one get referenced items. You just want to, get the items from clients, app, and projects. I've seen people where they say, nope, continue following. So follow references to another app. So it's kind of like chain link. So you can, if you've got, 10 apps, they all have references in between each other. You can keep clicking follow reference to another app, and it'll kind of link all of those items and bring all of those items in Podio together so you can use them later in your flows. More times than not, you don't need more than one or two, or maybe you want to use one later after another action. But I've definitely seen people get pretty wild.
Yep. And again, if anyone's ever intimidated, we do have an amazing partner network as well as a great community within Podio Workflow Automation and our amazing support team. So if there's questions, we'll show you how to submit support tickets. If it's something you're interested in bringing in a partner, some of the things I've seen them be able to create makes my head hurt. It's really impressive.
Mine too.
Yep. So a good example of when we'd want to use get reference items is, again, kind of circling back here. So I'm on the project, I'm triggering the workflow based off of the project, but I want something to occur with information that lives in the app that's related. So when I'm saying get referenced, I'm saying I want the fields from the app in that relationship field. So this is a great example for this particular flow. We're sending a templated email to the customer. So I still use those tokens, but at the top, I'm going to have the sort of the fields within that item itself. So the project, when you continue scrolling down, you can see where it says referred client or referenced client. So I can then be able to pull all of those fields from the client that's linked as well. So in this case, I'm triggering up that update on the project. I don't have to go back and do double data entry. I don't need to update that client field manually. I'm able to go ahead and say, cool, with this, it's sending to that client name. It's coming from the project manager's name. The reply all is going to be their email. You can see it's the update for that project title. I'm sending the email to that individual, letting them know it's gone from pending to stage 1. Other actions I have here is quite a few tasks, both to multiple team members and an individual project manager. I have a comment coming through that's actually going to mention the account manager on the sales side to the project itself so that they're aware without having to check a report that it's gone through to that next stage. And then we've created a nice little variable here. Kelly, you want to touch a little bit more on creating those variables? I know we touched a little bit on that when we were doing sanity checks, but just to put it in a little bit more of a relatable term.
Yeah, so a variable, you can custom name it. This is one we call the cost. And again, because it's in that yellow, you're going to be using PHP. You can still pull in your tokens, but any other, anything in there, like she has the little asterisks in PHP, that's going to be, for math, we're going to multiply. We have an article that can walk you through some more customization. So if you need to strip out, mobile from a phone number field, you can do that through a custom variable. And then the great thing is once you have that variable made, if there's anything wrong with it, it's going to highlight in red. So you're going to know instantly something's wrong, and you're going to have to change, your syntax or something. And then once it's good to go, this one's great. There's no red around it. That variable instantly becomes available in your token list. There's no refresh needed. You just move on, add a new action, and then your token list has that variable, and it'll have any other variable that you've created.
Yep. And another great thing when we're talking about creating those custom variables is going to be that sim bars. So being able to simulate the variables, it can take a sample item to make sure that it looks right without you having to go back into Podio and run that flow over and over again to test it. Because I know poor Kelly has helped me with many a workflow where we've just sat there doing sim bars the whole time to make sure we can figure out what's going on. All right, cool. So
sim bars is your friend.
Sim bars is absolutely your friend. But cool. So we have this nice little sample app here. Again, I'll just go ahead and save that. If ever you needed to turn an app off, you can just, where it says enabled, I can go ahead and just disable it. It's not deleting it, so I don't have to rebuild it. So it's still always going to be there as a reference, but it's just not going to trigger because I don't have that turned on. All right, cool. Other thing I wanted to show here and let Kelly kind of go into some details is going to be that log section. So we can see this particular flow. So changing the status sends those 5 tasks, sends out that client email, is saving me 10 to 13 minutes. One of my favorite things literally in the entire platform is that they call it human work. So tell me that this was written by a bot without telling me this was written by a bot. But yeah, so it's just a nice way to get a good sort of sample. There's an algorithm in place based off of the amount of time each action takes. But just like sim bars is your friends, logs are your friend. And we recently have updated some things where you can download logs and be able to get that in a larger span. Kelly, do you want to touch a little bit more on what logs really are and what that's kind of helping you with each flow to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the logs, thankfully, while the product may seem a little technical, especially at first glance, the logs, we've really broken it down for layman's terms. It will go through literally everything from the moment it says, so you have completed flip bottom. Can you scroll up a bit, Mac, for when the first, there we go, triggered flow, item update. In this case, it's an item update. So we have that triggered flow. It goes literally line by line. The big number to the left of all of these lines, that's your Podio item number. So if you're ever trying to figure out which item, is this happening on, that's the item number. But going back to the line item, so triggered flow, item update, that's our trigger. Performing field changed, which is her filters. Performing field value match, more filters. And if you could scroll down a little bit more. I'm on that next part, yeah. And then get referenced. She did the get reference to the other app. Her action is performing send email. If you're sending an email, it will tell you what email address it's sending to, including the BCC.
Yeah, I was gonna say, while we're here, that BCC, I didn't touch on this when I opened up that flow, but every item in Podio has its own unique email address as well. So what I've said is I want a BCC copy of this email, and if they hit reply all, it would come back as well to just feed into the comment section of that app in Podio, so I can confirm that that email went out.
Yeah, and that's a great option to use. And then performing her 3 create tasks, and then add comment, and then completed flow. So these are very, very easy to read. We really used, exactly what you're doing. We plug them right in here. If you ever have a problem or it says there's no logs, I think, it means your flow probably hasn't run for at least a few days. If you ever see anything in red, that's an error message. We have a whole article listed, right? So it'll be very clear, very obvious. We do have a help article that lists almost all of the error messages, and it tells you how to fix it, and it tells you why it's happening. So you can hopefully self-solve. Or if it's a new error message that we're getting, we look at that to see what's going on.
Yep. And we'll go through how you can submit some of those tickets towards the end of this meeting as well, just to give a nice little guideline for that. But again, one of the newer things that's just recently been launched is the ability to download more logs. So especially, again, if we're a little bit more technical, we're working with a partner or developer, instead of just being able to view it here, I can actually download a full list up to a certain item limitation to really get the full scope of like what's happening, can see which lines are creating the issues, be able to go in and make those modifications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, cool. So hopping in here, we want to talk a little bit about things like webhooks or hook events. So we built out a very comprehensive flow, which is also going to utilize that sort of automation with a share file and write signature as being part of that whole family. So I'll go ahead again, just to show this one for that autofill first name. This is going to be similar to that web form example I had given. Whenever that web forms has been submitted, I want the first and last name to just populate in one field so that I can make that a little bit cleaner for any sort of communication. For this nice little PDF flow, you can see there's a lot happening. Every single time this flow is generated, it saves 22 to 38 minutes. So just think about that in real time. You generate this twice, and that's an hour. Human minutes, excuse me. Human work. That's almost an hour of human work saved. But I'll go ahead and edit this just so you guys can see the inside. In this case, again, I'm using that item updated, as we kind of joked about. It's used quite often. Again, I'm saying if this is a little bit more that CRM sales side, if my status of a client is equal to offer pending, so I've moved it into offer pending, and my type of client is equal to an individual client. So this is saying, it had to have been where that's the status. I've changed the status itself to offer pending. It doesn't matter what stage I was in prior, but it's looking at a different field and saying, because it's a different type of client, I want XYZ to occur. So you can have filters based off of as many fields within your template as you want to. You can really, really narrow into specifically what you want to have occur. But in this case, I am creating a PDF. So with this, I can name that file. With these PDFs, you really get a blank sheet. You can copy and paste a Word doc in here and make that really, really smooth. I will say if you are using ShareFile, particularly ShareFile with Write Signature, and you have a PDF that has a ton of graphics or crazy formatting, you probably want to do that as a Write Signature template. It's just easier to format in that way. You can do merge fields just like you would within creating it as a PDF. Just something to keep in mind if we're looking at different documents here. But here I have just an engagement letter. You can see it's pulled the client's name in. I have some areas for when it's signed and dated. We do have the ability for things like text tags. So if using a signature tool, particularly Write Signature, I like to have them in white font so that they don't show up. But this is also available within the Podio workflow automation help page. That's a signature tag, so it'll add a signature box and Write Signature. That's a date tag, so it'll add that calendar field. So I've created the PDF. Now I'm sending it via Write Signature. And a lot of times people think this can be very, very tech heavy. It's as simple as this. Selecting that from that option list. I'm defining the client name from Podio. I'm pulling their email. You can see I'm allowing for those text tags so that signature box and date box will occur. It's that most recent PDF that we just created, and I can sort of customize my messaging here. I'm also creating a new share file folder, which is something that's a little bonkers. You don't see this a lot of times, and it can be a huge, huge help. But whenever I've moved that to offer pending, I've now created a folder underneath that client name within my share file environment. So I already have that folder there. I'm also saving the pre-signed version of that engagement letter to that specific folder, so I don't need to move that through. And I'm even adding the client directly to that folder here. So just think of the amount of time you've had to go back and forth to try to manage that. To be able to streamline that within a workflow that you would already be looking for anyway is just such a huge help. In this case, I also have a welcome email going out. As you can see, just thank you for joining us today. And I'm creating a new item within my client project app. So being able to say, like, I want a project to generate linking back to this client solely because I've moved them through. So being able to pull all of that through really, really cleanly. With that, if we wanted to do something like a hook event, saying like, if I wanted to create an item and I want more things to go through, you can see I have this option right here. Kelly, I'm gonna go ahead and let you shine like the bright star that you are and speak a little bit about hook events or web hooks, because that's gonna be a little bit more on that technical side.
Yeah, sure. So hook events are for when you want that action in this flow to trigger another flow. So if you had another flow based off of a new item being created in the projects app, then this can fire off that item, being created. If you do not have hook event selected and you have a flow where when a new project is created in that app, Workflow Automation will not recognize it because it's seeing how that item was created. It'll work if you manually create an item or if you do it through a web form. It will not work if it's created through the flow. So if you want any of your actions to trigger another flow, make sure you click that blue OPT right next to your action and then make sure that hook event is selected. A web
great
hook.
example of that would be is if you have like deliverables that are also generating anytime a project is created.
Mm-hmm. You want to be careful with hook events though, that you're not creating loops. So you don't want, a new project created, trigger another flow, and then that flow triggers another new one that you're starting this flow with. That'll be a loop. That won't be good. But hook event is good if, once you kind of figure out what your plan is and what you're doing, make sure you select that. Web hooks are different. They sound the same, but they're different. A webhook is by an external link being clicked, not on Podio, not on Workflow Automation. So mostly I've seen it on like somebody has, their website, they have a custom web form, usually through the website creator. And they want when somebody enters their details and then hits that submit button to trigger something on our end, that's when you're going to use a webhook. So webhook's external, hook event is within itself.
Yeah, and I think another good way to think of webhooks is because Podio is API first, which is one of the few platforms that is, which is what makes it so powerful, but we are also open source. So there's a ton of third-party integrations that exist that aren't necessarily created by Podio. Partners have done wonderful things with this. Companies like Workato, Automate.io, Tray.io, Zapier all have third-party integrations here. But if it's one of those things you need something like, let's say, on QuickBooks Online to generate something within Podio, that's going to come into that webhook area. If you're getting too involved with the webhooks, again, we would recommend working with a partner just to make sure that it's being set up correctly and not causing you the headache. But that's a nice way to think about how those can function.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So the other big thing that we've gotten a lot of questions about is, how do I reach out for support? It's, I have, the Podio help page, but that's, more for Podio basic questions or things within my template. I have questions around specific workflows. Maybe I've been trying to build something and I keep getting an error in my log. Maybe I think everything looks correct, but I'm getting nothing to do, no match returned. Maybe I just don't know where to start with a particular flow that I'm trying to build. We actually have a designated support team specifically for Podio Workflow Automation. And when I tell you that they save my life on a regular basis, I am not being, hyperbolic. I need them. I don't function without them. But it's a little bit different when they're not sitting at two desks across from you. So if you did need to submit a specific workflow ticket, we can go into help. Again, this is also going to be where a lot of your resources are. So, real-time examples, the help manual, lab experiments. Kelly, I'm going to circle back to you on this one in just a moment, but I can just go to support tickets. And with this, I can see any tickets we've had. Again, I can see the sort of what I can do here. I can go ahead and hit new ticket. And now I'm able to kind of plug in the specific problems I'm having. Because I've submitted this on that particular page, it's going to route to the correct team. So it's not like you're going to, Citrix or ShareFile support and getting passed to 16 different people. We have the team that would pull this directly. Kelly, do you want to touch a little bit on the sort of our workspace on Podio and that environment that we've been able to provide?
Yeah. Do you mind if I back up to support tickets real quick though?
Not at all.
Okay, cool. So if you can go back to your my flows tab at the top, because this is going to be needed for those tickets. And then go ahead and click on any of your actual flows. Okay. So right here, you have a problem with this flow. It's not working correctly. There's an error message, whatever the problem is. When you submit a support ticket, or once you've submitted one and we respond to you, we're going to ask you for the flow ID and or the flow name. That flow ID is right there. Mac highlighted it. Just highlight that and copy it when you make your ticket. Or your flow name. We can find it by flow name as well. We can see your workflow automation side. We cannot see your Podio side. And for the workflow automation, it's kind of more like a view only. We're not going to edit your stuff. We can't delete stuff. We can just log in there and look at it, and then we can help you further. But we're going to need that information when you submit a ticket. And then when you do submit a ticket, you can go to your third tab at the top, Matt. So the first one, you're not going to have an option for workflow automation immediately. You're going to click Podio first. That's going to bring you to My Team in General. And then when you get to the next page, it's, yeah, there you go. Help me. You'll have some articles from our help center. If none of those are what you're looking for, you're going to do final step at the bottom right. And then this drop down, this is where you're going to select workflow automation. That is going to bring you directly to not only the Podio team, but the specific people who primarily work on Podio workflow automation. That's how you can get to us absolutely directly without an extra day or two of trying to figure out what your question is around. If you just do a general one to Podio and you say workflow, we also have Podio workflows. We have no idea what you're talking about. So if you do workflow automation, you put in, here's my flow name, here's my flow ID, we know exactly what you're dealing with and we can help you immediately. Thank you, Matt, appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So if you want help quicker, if you enter that data, exactly, just do something like that. We can, as soon as we get your ticket, we can look at it right away. So back to the, yeah, perfect. Help tab, our workspace on Podio.
Oh, I haven't been added to it yet in this demo space.
Oh.
That's okay.
So the workspace on Podio, it's a fantastic place. It is full of partners, high-level partners, medium partners, super users, people who impress me with just, 5 minutes of their work. I'm like, wow, that would have spent 10 hours on that. You can post questions on there, especially if you have a really complex situation, unique custom calcs, or the calc you built or found isn't working right. That is where you're going to ask your question. Support, we can help you with some basic calc stuff, but we cannot help you with custom coding, or if somebody custom coded for you, like you hired someone for a week and then their job was done. If that breaks for whatever reason, we really can't help you with that. This place you can absolutely go to, post your question, you can search. It's in a Podio workspace, it's in an app. It's a great resource just to get ideas of what's out there or how to solve something. Or you can just post and somebody will reply to you. They are very, very active. We obviously can't guarantee you'll have an answer in 4 hours, but it is a very active space. A lot of our partners are in there constantly helping people, and it's a great community.
I also think this is great too, just being able to have that sort of community and also just knowledge sharing, where it's, I know I want to accomplish it. I'm thinking it's this way. Is there a better way to do it? I'm not really sure how to bounce that off of someone. Oh, I tried it this way and it worked this, blah, 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 blah. But it's a really nice way to kind of almost like a hive mind of being able to bring all of these resources together. I've been struggling with this flow for so long. It's like, oh, you just needed to add this one field. And it's like, I should have come here. And so just different ways to be able to leverage, as much as you possibly can. We really tried to go above and beyond with these resources for people, between the lab experiments, between the help manual and the real-time examples, customer stories. We really just want to make sure people feel supported and that we're, anything that we have that we can give as far as helping people along their journey within Podio Premium, specifically Podio Workflow Automation, that we want to make sort of front and center so they can be able to access that. All right, great. So that's really what we had on the agenda for today.